Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Yeah, that's right. You are listening to the OverPower Mountain podcast with your host, Marcel, the greatest overpower player ever. Well, boy, do we have a doozy for you today. That is right. We are going to be talking about and reviewing the NAOL Boston Battle for Boston. Used to be known as the Boston Massacre, but the Battle for Boston that happened November 9th, 2024. Boy, did we have a great tournament. You know, I was putting a lot of work into this particular tournament, as I'm sure you were hearing through, the voice of my podcast. And I thought I was really locked in. I was really prepared for this one. You know, a lot of people who are close to me knew that I was really gunning for this particular tournament, almost shooting for it. But alas, the young prodigies of the game seem to have, taken my word and listened to my heed. And I am proud to say that a listener of the podcast took the winning ring from the Battle for Boston. But we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But before we get into the nitty gritties of everything, first off, I want to always say thank you to the listeners for listening. You keep hitting the like button, and I do appreciate it. The comments, always appreciate it. Of course, always throwing me out show ideas to, just positivity. And at the end of the day, I really just want to say, please keep that coming, because I appreciate it, and I do this for nothing but the love of Overpower and to try to help people get better at the game. So thank you, and please keep listening. As we move on, though, I want to say a few more thank yous. These ones are more directed towards the Battle for Boston tournament. And of course, first and foremost, I want to thank, Joe and Ron and Sean Sawyer for setting up the Battle for Boston tournament. The three of them, very intricate in, not only getting the location, but creating the hype, the buzz, organizing, filming, and of course, even doing commentary live on site, which is always fantastic in my eyes, because I feel like when you do commentary on site, a lot of the times you can really feel the excitement through the commentator's voice. And Joe does a great job of that. I think it's a little tough maybe when Joe is trying to do it himself all day to try to keep that sort of on your shoulders. But other than that, I think, he did a fantastic job. And like I said, you could really hear the excitement through his commentary through a lot of the games, which I always think is exciting when you don't know the end result of what's going to happen in the game. So kudos to the three of them for running an amazing tournament. I know, of course, it's very hard to run a tournament, and Joe did step aside and just do the commentary. Of course, Ron was running almost all the tech and behind the scenes stuff as well. And I know Sean Sawyer was intricate in, not only boarding a lot of people from what I heard, to also, facilitating a lot in terms of the location. So thank you again, all of you. A very special thank you to Dave McMillan for actually allowing me to stay with him in his personal home. It was a last second sort of scenario, and I do truly appreciate you, Dave. Thank you very, very much for being you. As well, of course, the Bertrands clan. I appreciate you to the core. We are always van buddies, and I do appreciate, the laughs and the good drives, and, I hope we have many more to come. All right, thank yous aside. That part's over. I appreciate you all at home for listening to that. So let's get to the good stuff. What a great tournament. 42 players. Wow. So biggest tournament Overpower has seen in the Renaissance era. So that's, of course, since the game came back, rebirthed around 2014, roughly around that era. So 42 players. Wow. I knew this was coming, personally. They were speaking of maybe even getting up to like the number of 50, which really made me stop and pause, kind of just the way I did there. I thought if we got to the 50 number, I might have to run a 6-1 record, and that just really seemed sort of maybe unrealistic to some sort of thought, but I knew no matter what I had to do that I was going to bring an amazing deck. And, like I said, I was really locked in. I was watching lots of video. I was truly prepared for it all. But alas, not everything goes according to plan, as we all know. And let's just say, at the wrong time, did my deck decide to not do what I wanted it to do, and that was win. So I'm not one to ever complain. I'm always one to retrospect and think about what I can do different to make my deck better, as opposed to just always looking at and thinking, oh, my deck duped out or something along those lines. But my deck is my own problems, and where I finished is my own issue as well. But I will say I had a very successful tournament, and I did end up the top seed coming out of the Swiss at 6-1. So the GOAT was raring, the GOAT was ramming people left, right, and center, right off the top of the mountain for sure. And I remember earlier in the season as well, in the OP Cup, I also was the top seed coming out of the Swiss. And there was a few issues with some of the software we were using for the pairings and the ratings, and also they had gone to a top 12, which they have also done in the Battle for Boston. And if people who had been listening to these podcasts, I always talk about like learning from your mistakes, and understanding what adversities might come in a tournament ahead of time. And if you can't see it ahead of time, remembering it for future events. Well, in the OP Cup, like I said, there's some software issues, plus, the top 12. The way it broke down was I was in the top 4. So, you get a bye for a round, and then the bottom 8 play off to see who gets to play the top 4 for the top 8 for the finale of the tournament. And so I do remember it was like a 3-hour period, with a couple snafus and a dinner break and so on, where I wasn't even playing OverPower. And I just remember this elongated break, and it really took a toll on me in Ohio. So, I was really prepared for something along those lines. Now, again, it wasn't something, as catastrophic as that and, such a long break, but it was a longer break again. And, coming out as the top seed, again, I was going to have this sort of like bye passed around plus dinner break and, on and on. And of course, my final match also went, relatively quick. So again, I had this sort of elongated break. Well, this time I had mentally prepared. I calmed myself down. I did some stretching. I had saved half of my sandwich from lunch and ate it in that little break period. I also don't drink a lot of energy drinks, and I happened to have a Red Bull at that particular time. So it's kind of really jazzed me up, and I was sort of ready to go for the top 8, because of course in Ohio I did end up losing in the round of 8 right away after the break, coming back. So I didn't want that to happen again, of course. And thankfully, in my quarterfinal match, I was teamed up against Ricky, who was actually having a wonderful day, a player from Oklahoma. And he was playing sort of like a combo-ish style deck in terms of new warriors, kill cards, through the Onslaught Citadel, Scarlet Witch. Really, really, really funky sort of, I don't want to really call it a combo style deck, but it did have a lot of like combo-esque feels to it, and relied on a lot of cards sort of doing things and sort of manipulating the game in his fashion. So oftentimes if a deck can get ahead of a deck like that, it's hard for a deck like that to sort of like come back in any sort of fashion. So in our game, it was actually quite a unique game. From him playing Rage to me letting it hit and then negating it, offensively later in the round. To my Nightcrawler six intellect coming out of my battle site and actually stripping off one of the big mechanics of his deck, which is the Infinity Gauntlet. So, I thought of that great moment of Nightcrawler basically like having this cameo moment of me throwing it across the board, and he just literally rips the Infinity Gauntlet off one of his characters. It just was comic book-esque brilliant moment. That's what makes Overpower truly an amazing game. Just the moments like that just always make you smile, and I'm smiling right now thinking about it. That Nightcrawler 6 that he just did not see coming. I knew it was basically sort of like a hidden secret weapon. Again, it's a 6 intellect from Nightcrawler. If successful, opponent must discard a 1 tactic card, which of course is an artifact card, which of course is in the Infinity Gauntlet, which he was using to sort of resurrect New Warriors for the combo-esque effect of drawing 3. That's how much I'll sort of go into that deck. Stripping off this one mechanic was just brilliant, and again, he didn't see it coming, and I don't know if it was absolutely necessary for me to win the game, but it was pretty much the second I pulled that mechanic away, his deck sort of became a little bit more of a Mortal-esque style deck, and there's flaws in Mortals, and you can see them relatively quick once you take things like that away. So that was my top 8 game, and it ended up being me in a medium sort of game and approach. Great game by Ricky, but again, my deck sort of just had a lot of answers for what he was trying to do and accomplish. So then we get to the Final Four. Yes, my friends, the Final Four. That's how close my hands and my grasp was on this ring. I was 2 wins away from a 42-person tournament from getting my hands on that little ring. And, much like Gollum, it's not mine anymore. So it's gone. And I can just dream about it in my little cave. So as we move on, though, Final Four. And let me tell you what a Final Four it was. So, and in order of finale and finish, I'm going to give it away right away, friends, because this is not necessarily a surprise podcast about who won this tournament. Most people know at this point in time. And from 4th to 1st, we have Sean Ballantyne basically running a Juggernaut-centered strength-style deck. With Thing in reserve, so sort of backing up the stats. Colossus and I believe Serpent Society. So sort of a little bit of a light shell game approach. And I believe he was playing a really, really, really huge 1 per deck out of his Outback battle site, which was Absorb Sound from Dazzler. So great tournament, Sean. You well deserved. They didn't actually have us play a 3rd and 4th place game because they just give it to the higher seeding, because they just don't usually have those types of games due to time constraints and, no need for rankings or anything sort of like to be played against for a game that truly is inconsequential towards any sort of championship ring. With that being said, though, I did kind of spoil it there. I did come 3rd, losing my semifinal game. We're going to get to that in a moment. Well, this is another 3rd place finish this year for me. So, it's tough to get really close to these rings. You make these top 8s and you're hoping to just put an amazing run through the second tournament and, everything has to go right to, especially this day and age where the line of defeat, the line of, equality between players is so fine. Um, you truly can't make too many mistakes this day and age. So, with that all being said, we shall continue on. Number 2 in the tournament, Mr. Tyler Bertrand. One of the old school players from the 90s. Amazing player. Used to play an amazing deck with Spider Girl, Spawn, and Heroes for Hire. Ended up becoming highly ranked back in the day. And sort of came back to this renaissance OverPower sort of midway through. And sort of, hit the scene really hard early. And then sort of went into a little bit more of what I would say like experimental combo-ish style decks, but then sort of like a true master kind of perfected his own style and his own way of playing. We're going to get into that a lot very shortly, but just kudos to him for another, I believe it's a second place finish of the year. So, he was, twice that close to a ring and just slipped through his fingers. So I'm sure he's feeling his own way this year. And of course, first was Andrew Taylor, the prodigy, the young man. I know he's an avid listener of the podcast. Probably where he learned all of his skills. I can only imagine. But one thing I will say is, the few conversations that I did get to have with him, and I did get to have a game with him, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But the few conversations I got to have with him, you could just really tell the depth of knowledge that he's really trying to grasp, both with this game, through historics as analytics, as well as constantly thinking about current meta and current teams and I guess the way tournament structure is, he just really sort of very deep thoughted young man, and I only say young man in terms that I firmly believe that he's younger than me. I call these guys young prodigies, but I imagine they're in their late 20s, early 30s. Not trying to throw out any numbers at any people here. So let's really break this down now. That's what everybody's truly here for. I know everybody already knows the results of the tournament. So my semifinal game obviously was against Tyler Bertrand. There was actually a lot more riding on this game that a lot of people sort of didn't grasp. It was something in the NAOL season called Player of the Year. It was actually already won by another player who had already locked up first place, and a lot of people were sort of battling for this second place position, myself being one of them. Well, a lot of things broke down, and it basically came down to whoever succeeded in our semifinal game, whether it was Tyler Bertrand or myself, Marcel, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, would basically win second place of Player of the Year. Now, what's funny about this is, a lot of times, moments like this, people don't even realize they're there, and, they can say, oh, I didn't even know that was occurring, so, they don't play under the pressure and, the issues of that. Well, him and I had actually been talking a lot, as, Tyler is a friend of mine, and we had actually already broken down the math and understood that when the two of us sat down, that, this prestigious honor of second in Player of the Year was basically on the line in this one game of OverPower. Now you have to remember there's 5 tournaments throughout a whole year of OverPower, and the fact that it all breaks down to whoever wins this game essentially goes through not only to the finals and continues their run in this tournament, but is already going to win second place and player of the year. So quite a lot of pressure mounted. And, the greatest thing is that both of us knew it, and we truly just wanted a great game. It did come down to, sort of like a card advantage style scenario, how it broke down and how it sort of like fell in his favor. But you never make an excuse for a great player. He is a great player. He built a great deck, and on this particular day, his deck had answers for everything I was trying to do. So every scenario where I could have came back, and I tried to, twist the hands of fate, he was able to sort of answer it and sort of throw it back in my face and say, no, 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 no. And, we're going to sort of talk about it right now, about his deck and what he sort of brought to this. And I think it was an idea that I was contemplating right on early on, after the Seattle tournament, and I was sort of focusing on the new meta and focusing forward. I had really had this thought of on my own as well, but I was really stuck on a certain structure of how I wanted my deck to play in the current Overpower format. And, obviously I did very well in tournaments, so I can't, doubt myself on all my beliefs and my deck structure. But, I was really truly contemplating the idea of a dual negate deck. Now, Tyler did it in a very, very unique approach here. He basically approached the double negate deck through his 8 character, which is Dracula. Now, Dracula, of course, has a plethora of cards, but one of his cards being, play this card and it sits in front of Dracula, and when an opponent plays a non-numerical special, you may use it, discard that card to negate the effect of that special. So it doesn't work against 11s, 10s, 9s, or any sort of numerical special, but anything from like a leech to a Raza to opponent drop 3, to a draw 3, is all usable from this Dracula negate. And, Ty, recognizing, of course, as, I'm sure a lot of the great players were, that a lot of the big boy cards were starting to come out and coming out to play. And, everybody was sort of throwing these sort of game-winning monster cards around, and sort of you needed a way to sort of stop these scenarios. And they weren't necessarily always based off large attack values. A lot of them were based off these non-numerical sort of just big boy cards that popped off and sort of changed the fate of a lot of games. Well, I'm sure, he sat down and understood this structure, and he sort of went back to an old school style deck that he had, as I mentioned, went off into his little hermit worlds and sort of perfected these amazing sort of combo-y style decks. Well, the deck he brought was Dark Beast, Dracula, Spider Girl, and Spider Woman in reserve. He had Asclepion as his home base, and he had Hell's Kitchen as his battle site. Now, this basically is a dual negate, mono 8, with plethora of win conditions, but of course one of the main win conditions, and one that Tyler has perfected over sort of time, is the lock offs. Now, obviously, this is an advanced podcast. I'm not going to explain a lot of things to you, but lock offs being like when you stop a character from being attacked, essentially. So, one of the big boys obviously is Dracula in the center of his deck. When I talk about a mono 8, I'm referencing the big boy Dracula here. He's the 8 intellect in the deck. The great thing about him is he's 22 points, and the instant fit of Spider Woman in the back creates the effect of paying for him right away, because she's 16 points, the old version, and then Dracula, of course, being 22. So they instantly pay for each other, and they have a complementary stat of the 6 strength that works between the two of them as well. Of course, back in the Dracula days, this was my instant build with the two of them. I just thought they were a perfect fit together. Now, with this fit, though, that he had built, again, his Drac build is really focused around stopping teamworks. Now, the thing that I really want to sort of recognize here is his understanding of the current meta that was happening in Overpower right now. So in the current scene right now, a lot of things that were happening is the game was getting slowed down a lot. Now it's getting slowed down in the respect of it was getting slowed down in the respect that like a lot of people weren't playing both teamworks or like a large amount of teamworks, as well as a lot of people were even playing like anti-teamwork events at this point in time. So they were slowing things down to more of a one-to-one sort of card style playing ratio against each other. Now, what people don't grasp is this caters perfectly to a Dracula style deck. Dracula style decks are very slow, and they usually can't deal with a lot of speed being thrown at them at any sort of like fast pace. Now, of course, once everybody started slowing the game down, Dracula becomes a perfect fit again. So, Tyler understanding this and, adapting back to an old style deck that maybe sort of fell out of vogue a little bit because, it wasn't working with the meta that was per se were at the time. It really was a perfect timing to sort of bring this deck back into vogue. And, when I sort of talk about the few other things about this deck, you'll understand why. Well, let's reference the Dracula character right away. So obviously he has the 8 intellect. He's throwing out the big boy power cards from your deck. He's already that sort of like mainstay character for you in that world, and he's holding down sort of your grid area as well. Now, he used the Dracula from the classic, which holds the 5 fighting stat and, of course, the 6 strength. Now, this is actually pretty vital to the deck decision as well, because as you can tell, Dark Beast has the 6 fighting stat as well as the 7 intellect. And then, of course, you flip over to Spider Girl, and she has the 6 fighting stat as well. Now, this probably allowed him to play, I would assume, at least 1 5 fighting power card, as all 3 frontline characters can use it. And of course, when your reserve character comes up, we'll save that for another podcast, but power card playability from your reserve character can sometimes be a little bit wishy-washy depending on how you build your decks. So already this grid alignment I'm really a big fan of. One of the big things with Dracula especially is the fact that he often can't throw a lot of venture himself other than his big power cards like the 8s and bigger teamworks like the 8 intellect teamwork as well. So the fact that you have him paired up with like a Spider Girl and a Dark Beast, both of them having like a larger style attack to provide some oomph and some ability to sort of create venture total on the other side of the table when you lock off your characters or you're in a tense battle. So Dracula has also a very dynamic card. So you're using Dracula for the 3 reasons, okay? I would say 4, basically, his 8 stat as well. So one of the first reasons, the first reason being the 8 stat. The second reason being the non-numerical negate, which we had discussed as well. The third reason, I would say at this point, is you're using him for the DZ. Now, the DZ is a card often referenced as the Trick Transport because it first came out for the Nightcrawler character. But it essentially is target character may not attack or be attacked for remainder of battle. Now, it's amazing in so many ways because of its functionality. So essentially it can both be used in terms of offense or defense. So you essentially can use it on your opponent's character to prevent their character from attacking you any further, locking down any cards that may be placed to them. But you can also use it on your own character, and you can actually use it, yes, it does have the negative effect that your own character can't attack anymore, but if you use it maybe like later, mid to late round, oftentimes you can put it on a character. You do have to do it offensively, but you can use it almost as a block off for one of your characters, as of course once it gets played, that character can no longer be attacked anymore. So, sort of adding into sort of his win conditions of the lock off effect as well. So DZ, very, very nice card. I was even using one particularly myself, the Nightcrawler version, out of my battle site, and very functional in that way as well. Just an amazing card all around. Well, I of course saved Dracula's best card for last, and that is he has a card that says opponent may not play any cards with the word teammate on it. Now, this is a really big card because, first and foremost, people don't realize there's a lot of cards in Overpower that have the word teammate on it. Now, it can be anything from ally cards to teamwork cards to team defense style cards, whether it be from the reserve 1-9ers to the frontline 1-9ers. Oftentimes, there's a lot of your battle site cards that are teammate defense style cards that don't get used as well. A lot of times, your shift style cards often lose their functionality. So, this card often, when played, can often get, I would say, more than a 1-to-1 ratio. It can often get the 2-to-1, if not upwards to, like, I'm sure, I'd love to hear what the number of the max he's gotten in his career. I can only imagine it's like 6 to 8 cards for the one card played by Dracula. That all the rest had teammate written all over it. Now, this doesn't hit every style of deck, but it really hits a lot of decks, especially ones with team style defense, which is very prevalent in Overpower, just across the board. So, an amazing card. The best thing, probably in my mind, about the card for Dracula is that it says opponent. Now, anybody knows, in many podcasts we've discussed this, there's my favorite AI card out there is opponent must discard one place special card. And of course, why is that, audience? Give you a minute to answer. Because your opponent has to negate it. That's right. It's a card that must be negated. Now, of course, Tyler, of course, while thinking things through, understood that Dracula's negate actually can negate those style cards as well. But in regards to Dracula's card, it does say opponent. It's not actually targeting a particular character on your opponent's side. So your opponent actually has to negate that card. So if you don't have a negate or access to a negate, that card is going to essentially always go through. Now, that's just devastating. Round after round after round after round, he gets to play cards with teammate and you don't. It's just such a devastating effect that it's why when I saw this card, it almost reminded me of the Vertigo days. It's just such a powerful card. Now it's on a character that is, has tons of points. I think it's just very nicely balanced, to be honest, because it's on a character with tons of points, or who's worth tons of points, hard to get on the team, doesn't really have a lot of other, top tier big boy cards, but this card just is such a set him apart kind of character card. And Ty put it to just perfect use in this tournament. So, Drac being the tentpole mono 8 character here, you can understand he brings a lot to the table. Now, of course, being paired up with Dark Beast, a negator with 2 amazing 1/X, one being a big venture getter and one being a big venture stopper. Phenomenal, matching up with the stats perfectly with both Dracula and the third character, Spider-Girl. Now, Spider-Girl's an interesting pick here, and there's a lot to going on with the Spider-Girl pick here. I would say most people, their first thought with Spider-Girl is initially just a 1-9 sort of defensive style blocker. And honestly, that is what she is. She's an amazing team defense style character. I mean, one of her 1/X even says teammate may not be attacked for a remainder of battle. Again, adding to that win condition, lock off condition that Tyler's trying to get with his deck build that he has. So great characters sort of add in. Now, of course, one of her Marvels cards that was given was multi-8. So she's also providing a little bit of that oomph. And she does also have a 5 strength, which is quite nice. It does take away the inherent ability of the character that it's thrown if successful. So quite nice, for those like X Babies or Scarlet Witch style last second kills. It doesn't always time out well, but when it does, oh, you talk about that, at dinner, that tournament, and probably for the rest of the year to whoever will listen about your overpower rantings. So great character to sort of like complement the other two front lines as well. Now, of course, Spider-Woman in the back providing that overall team defense as well with the 1-9s in that regard. Now, this is a tough deck in terms of, the grids are there, but they're not there. So it's like it's good, but there's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong. Now, this type of deck is very much, in my mind, one of those masterclass decks. Like, this has to be played by somebody who truly understands what they're doing. And, you got to understand what hits you're taking, to what you're blocking, to what hands to even play, to what place cards you need to put down. Very, very skillful, masterful deck here that was built and skillfully, masterly played at the Battle for Boston. Um, the Sklepion home base adds quite a bit to the deck as well. Now, it works in conjunction, obviously, with his battle site, as of course none of the main characters. I mean, I believe Beast does have a remove hit, but I don't believe he would actually be playing that in the deck. But he could have actually been playing one of those. I don't think, one would be absolutely atrocious to put in this style of deck. Now, with that being said, though, I don't think he's really playing that. I believe he's using maybe the negates off Beast to sort of like maybe steal something off a permanent record, and then of course get that draw ability from a Sklepion and possibly that attack ability as well. Now, in Hell's Kitchen, there is of course a couple removes in terms of I know Daredevil has a remove 2 hits with blankety blank blank blank. I'm so sorry out there, but it's a fun little trivia moment. You can all look it up right now. I'm gonna say it's Intellect Icon. That's what's just popping in my head. I feel like he's I think it's the one where he's a lawyer and he's holding the book and he's wearing the glasses, and I think it's remove 2 hits with an Intellect Icon. So obviously, that card right away with Daredevil would be amazing. Just right away, activate the Asclepion inherent and basically allow you to draw a card as well and possibly attack with it. Now, the one thing I think that was very impressive to me, and I think very, very well thought out. Obviously, the enforcers being probably the main character that he was looking at in here, other than of course the Daredevil I just mentioned, also providing some amazing defense, and the Electric character also providing some of the best defense you can get in the game as well. Not to mention the big hits from the hand, and Bodyguard from Kingpin, and the 5 from Kingpin. And then of course, let alone the amazing Ghost Rider, who can DS you any card in your deck at any time, special wise, or remove anything on your opponent's side unless they're going to negate it, which of course is great as well with his AI. So you can just tell, amazing battle site. I actually used this to win the OP Cup, not this year but last, and kind of put this site a little bit on the map in terms of tournament play. Just a phenomenal overall defensive, great offensive site. Its probably biggest downfall is that it doesn't actually have a negate on the site, and that's a lot of the times what sort of brings it down a tier for a lot of the better players. But sometimes when you're playing a dual negate on your team, that negate on the site seems a little less trivial to have access to. So all of a sudden these sites become a little bit higher on a tier with a dual negate style deck, which is what he's bringing here. Now, the one thing I want to talk about is his amazing thought process. when it came to the one per deck. Now, a lot of the times when you're playing this battle site, or at least when I was, the one per deck chosen is the draw 3. You can choose it either for the Ghost Rider character or the Kingpin character. I happened to be using it for the Kingpin at that particular time, which again brought me great luck and success. I'm very fortunate for. And of course, he looked at it at a completely different approach. Now, I've seen him play this site before, and he used the Enforcers one per deck, very similar to the Hawkeye one, where you switch characters from frontline to reserve, and you get to remove all their hits from permanent and current battle. Great card, can actually win you a game, if not a battle, guaranteed. Well, the card he chose actually really shocked me, and he actually played it against me in the semifinal. I think he had the game already probably relatively locked up, but this moment really just kind of like pushed it over the top. I believe I had thrown a quite a large attack. I believe it was one of my 8 power cards, probably even followed up off of teamwork. And he just goes, "Oh, you're going to like this." And whenever an opponent says something of any nature like that to you, you're going to feel the exact opposite of what they're saying. So I was like, I am definitely not going to like what you're about to do right now at all. And he shows me an Enforcer's character, and he hadn't actually used the CD, which I believe is Snake Marsden, and the Only Universe attack. So I'm like, okay, so you're just going to use Only Universe to block this attack? And then I was like, wait a minute, it's off a Universe card. He can't do that. And or maybe I'm even thinking this wrong, but and then all of a sudden he flips the card, and I'm like, what is that? I don't even know what that card is. And he hands it to me, and I read it, and it's the Enforcer's Masters of Evil card. And of course, everybody knows, those cards, they're newer-ish, so a lot of people don't know those card pools as, solidly as you would other ones. And it's avoid 1 attack, remove 1 hit from Enforcers or teammate, and and of course, because this is this card, he actually activates a Skelepion with it. And then I'm just sitting here, so I'm like, not only do you avoid one of my big attacks here, but then you're going to remove a hit, and you're going to draw a card. I'm just like, that's like a 3-card swing you just did there. That's insane what just happened with this 1 card. I was like, that is so well thought out with that home base. I was just like, kudos, 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 kudos to you. This is just somebody who, like I said, is just thinking, between the lines, looking at the meta, looking for different ways and different sort of ways to sort of attack the meta. Now, it's actually Ty who introduced that term to me, win condition. And I actually really love it in terms of overpower. And I use it actually a lot when I speak to people. You want to have your deck to be able to win many different ways, not just through overpowering someone or them getting more dupes than you. And you don't want to depend on things like that. You always want to have different ways your deck can sort of push you towards a win or give you an edge. And this deck obviously just has so many different little tiny win conditions and little tiny tricks that it really is just a masterfully built deck that was played masterfully on the Battle for Boston, November 9th, 2024. One of the other tricks of this deck that I really want to talk about, and it actually featured really hugely in the final game that he ended up actually playing against Andrew Taylor. And it's through Spider-Girl herself. So she actually has an inherent ability. Now, the inherent ability actually says that any power cards played by Spider-Girl may not be defended by a card from the battle site. Well, this is really unique because Tyler adopted a way where he actually used, and I mean, I'm going to tell you now, anybody who's listened to the podcast knows I make fun of these all the time. But he made a way that double shots were usable. And now I'm sure he was only playing one. I mean, God, I hope so. He was only playing one. But the double shot he was using was really nice because it was actually an intellect double shot that paired up with a strength power card. So not a lot of double shots, very few of them actually give you this ability to have a multi-hit. Now, of course, the double shot acting like a 4 intellect and the strength power card being paired with it. Now, the really unique thing about what I'm about to say, though, you're like, why are you talking about double shots? You told me not even to care about them. Well, the unique thing that's done here is when you play that through Spider-Girl on one of your opponent's characters, well, he at that point needs an 8 to block that. Now, if you play that on a character who doesn't have an 8 stat, well, that's almost an unblockable card without either some, basic universe addition to a power card, because you can't use an activator to sort of block it. Now you're like, well, I can use, my team defense to block it, which is true. You absolutely can. If you have a 1-9 or something along those lines, you absolutely can use it for defense. But you have to remember the well thought out deck that he's running here. He's running cards that say you can't play cards with teammates. So if he gets one of his Dracula cards out that says no cards with the word teammate, and then he throws this double shot at you that's a multicolored 8 now, essentially, you now have to defend this with an 8 power card. There's no other card in your whole deck that can stop this card, because now he's locked down your team defense with his Dracula card, and essentially he's now locked down any access to your battle site because you can't stop it coming from Spider-Girl. Just an amazing, well thought out, sort of little strategy throw in there. And again, it actually came into play in the finals. And I'm not going to get too detailed into the final game too much, but I believe was actually a pretty pivotal moment and almost brought young Tyler back into the game. But of course, Andrew's deck, which we're going to get into, was just too overwhelming for it. So again, great. I don't think I could say the word great too many more times. About this deck. This was just like I said, in deck preparation podcast, I mentioned people thinking about where's the meta at, how can I counter it, what can I do, and him bringing back a deck that he's just so familiar with, knew the ins and outs, and then not even mentioning that he paired it up with Fatal Attractions as well, and played 2 amazing events. He played no energy icons, maybe used to attack, which of course, huge meta in Overpower, and huge part of the meta field is energy decks. So I imagine that was just a game winner, half of the day, as well as using, of course, New Wave. He's playing Asclepion, so he doesn't have any placed universe cards. And of course, the crux of the Dracula deck being, if Teamworks can sort of get off on him, he has a hard time sort of defending a lot of them. So he ended up playing remove all placed universe cards as well. Well, that not only hits Teamworks that get placed, but it also hits any of those Dracula's armories or Spartan training grounds, those home bases that sort of have all those placed universe cards to start the game with. It actually did happen in our semi-final game. This actually came out in the first round, and I happened to be playing Shield Cache, which is just another version of Dracula's armory. And I started the game off essentially losing that. So I had used 3 deck building points for naught, essentially, and lost my whole home base's ability immediately through his event. So, again, knowing that there's a lot of those armories out there, especially with more of the higher end players, again, a great event to play in that moment. Now, he also did play, I believe, no Teamworks, and all Teamworks must be discarded. So, again, trying to, stop the crux that could potentially sort of take down Dracula, which is Teamwork speed and teamwork effects, especially if you can't get that Dracula card to work. So, great overall thought out deck. Really loved it. It's one of his sort of like classics that came back. He really tweaked it. He really sort of like brought it down to sort of what I would call a more streamlined, well thought out deck. And I don't know, maybe message him online and maybe he'll reveal his deck build one day to everybody. So, great tournament by him again. And congratulations for beating me, because that's not very easy to do. I did mention that I was 6-1 in the tournament, and my only loss in the tournament was to Tyler again. So he actually seemed to have my number this day, and I can say I lost to nobody that day except for Tyler. He just single-handedly decided that that tournament was not for me, and what can I say? When you run into somebody like that who has your number that day, then they have your number that day. Of course, it only hurt a little bit more because of the whole severity of the Player of the Year resting on it, and there was a lot on that game. And as you all know, I'm sure you can hear through the iron of my voice that I truly did really want that, but alas, he beat me and he moved on to the finals. Now, of course, he ended up playing a young man named Andrew Taylor. I'm going to reference as the prodigy. Andrew played in the Seattle tournament that we had gone to a couple months ago. And he actually played very well. He had a very unique style deck and, was playing a good combo with events for it. And, I made it into the top 8. I'm not sure where he made it from there, whether he was in, the quarters or the semis round after that. But obviously, making a top 8 is not easy in OverPower, but that one was a smaller tournament, so people were sort of like being a bit adventurous with the Player of the Year rankings and changing up their decks for that. So there was a little bit of difference. So nobody really knew whether or not the Seattle players or Andrew Taylor himself were, dare I say, the real deal. As, here was the true test. A tournament of 42 players, largest field there is. And of course, they're coming to sort of test their might against the biggest and the baddest in all of the OverPower land. Well, the prodigy cut through the field relatively with ease and ended up, I believe, in a round 7 game or round 6 game against myself, and basically got into a scenario where, oh no, that's correct, it was game 7, because he got into a scenario where he was about to go undefeated in the tournament. But alas, his final obstacle was Marcel, the greatest OverPower player ever. Amazing match. I have to say, when you play somebody, and the game is a good one between the two of you, and there's a lot of like thinking and, manipulation and just good overall card play, you really get to know where somebody's at level-wise in the game of OverPower, because, you often can manipulate a lot of small incremental mistakes on your side, and that's often how you'll win a lot of the games. But when people aren't making those small incremental mistakes, you start to sort of see where a player is in terms of their skill level and so on. And in our match, brilliant back and forth style match. I have to say I pulled it out, and I believe I pulled it out by one venture. Just an amazing overall game, truthfully. So sadly, his only loss of the day was to me in the round of Swiss. But at the end of the day, Swiss is not where the bills are paid. Bills are paid in the playoffs and the finals. And this young man dominated. So let's start off with his deck. I'm going to sort of give you the breakdown again. We're looking at another dual negate style deck. Wow. Look at these guys thinking about the meta, really sort of understanding that a lot of the cards that are being played right now are just these big boy change the game specials, and these guys are just bringing cards to stop it. I'm sure they're avid listeners, and they're just like, he keeps talking about negates. I should play 3 negates. I should play 3 negates in my deck. That's literally how many negates I should play. A fourth one in my battle site. That's how many negates I believe. But he's playing a dual negate teamwork machine stat based deck. Now, really unique build here because he essentially brought a character that was just sort of like sitting on the pine, sitting on the sidelines. Galactus. Like the Eater of Worlds. Like, here we go, Devourer of World gets banned. Like Galactus's big moment in the game of Overpower. The card gets banned and nobody ever sees Galactus again. And Andrew Taylor is just like, no. Galactus isn't banned. Dow is banned. And Galactus is back. And he's angry that you banned him. Yeah, that is right. So Galactus is 8 in every stat. So 8 energy, 8 fighting, 8 strength, and 8 intellect. Now he counts only as 24 for the deck build. Still a lot of points. 24s, you got to sort of shave off 5 points now from your other characters. Now he was able to sort of do that through 3 points from Mojo, who's a 16-point character, and 2 points through Beast the Brute, who is a 17-point character. So right there, his 2 frontline characters already automatically paid for Galactus. So he was able to put a full 19-point character in reserve, and he elected for Doctor Strange, the new version. So of course that has the 6 intellect as well as his 8 energy. So it is an energy style deck, but the amazingness about Galactus is he has 8s in everything. So obviously, depending on how you build your deck, now you have the ability to sort of have these monster power cards coming out, as well as potential for monster teamworks here. Now, I'm only going to say thank you because Andrew actually did a little breakdown of his deck as well on YouTube. So if you do have a few minutes, obviously go check it out. He's literally showing you the guts of his deck and, explaining it to you from his own mouth. So that's always a great way to go about it. I'm going to tell you what I think about the deck in terms of like how I think he approached it. I think he, didn't even fully even understand the depth of how great of a deck he built here. Sometimes, you can't even see your own greatness because you're just right in the middle of it, buddy. So here's my full breakdown of it for sure. So again, dual negate, teamwork machine, stat-based deck. So the thing already that's great is because of Galactus, every stat on this deck is backed up. What do I mean by that? Well, it's the old adage of the Lambo. The Lambo was an amazing deck because not only did it have the team defense for everything, but it essentially had tons of teamworks being thrown out of different colors, and all the teamworks were backed up. Now, backed up essentially means you had to kill 2 characters to eliminate the ability to use that teamwork. Now, that's huge in the game of Overpower because oftentimes you don't lose 1 character, let alone 2 or 3, depending on how certain games go. Now, in this situation, he had it where, because of Galactus, every single power card / teamwork is backed up in his deck automatically. Unless, of course, he keeps them just for Galactus. And we're going to talk about that in a second as well. So already the stats are just really well done on this deck, and on top of it, even if you lost certain characters, like the intellect stat is backed up for the 6 teamwork, even with the Mojo and the Doctor Strange. So there's a lot of really smartness going on here. I have to admit, creativity, smartness, like just some well thought out ideas. So for Galactus, I know for a fact, in our game, I actually was lucky enough to kill Galactus relatively early on. So I ended up killing Galactus, and I knew I wasn't going to get too many cards, but I was really just trying to take away his like team structure, his team ability to have that sort of backed up grid. It just to me, getting rid of that personally was the way I thought was the best way through his deck. It worked for that particular game. Would it be the way I would approach his deck in the future? Probably not. But again, that's a whole other podcast. We can discuss all of that. So when I got rid of Galactus, I was expecting maybe one or two cards, and I assumed they were in the intellect range. I was lucky enough that I ended up getting rid of two intellect cards, an 8 intellect teamwork as well as an 8 intellect power card itself. So when I was able to kill Galactus, I was able to actually get a few discards out of it, but it wasn't many in the grand scheme. And again, I was fine with that. I was doing it for other reasons for that particular game. But again, not having many cards in for Galactus also just creates this amazing ability that he can use him as a kill character. And even if somebody like myself does go for him, as long as he gets those cards out, I mean, you essentially can let him die. I mean, he's only there to sort of like keep things flowing for that sort of world. Now, what I really liked about this is he sort of really pushed the level of teamworks in his deck. I know for a fact that he played 8 teamworks. That's what I was alluding to earlier when I mentioned he did his own breakdown. He actually showed that he played 8 teamworks in this deck. Now that is an amazing amount of teamworks. I don't think I've ever played 8 teamworks in a deck. To me, that would just, wouldn't even know where to get the power cards from to even to even have fuel for all of those teamworks. But it just truly showed that the ability of the speed as well as the larger hits from teamworks just really in this game of Overpower, it was one of the lessons from the great master Frank Yu. Teamworks were just is where the dream works. And I just remember him always just flaunting, like, put as many as in your deck as you can fit and then put some more. Andrew has just done exactly that, and just to brilliance. I think probably one of the effects that I was lucky enough to have is I was playing a very anti-teamwork style deck through events, and they did hit in a couple really good spots for me during our game as well. So that might have also been the crux when our two decks sort of faced each other. Now, with the 8 teamworks, he was playing a unique power card build as well. And again, only fortunate enough that he showed it online that I was able to see this. So he was playing one power card, and then he was playing 2 from the 2 through 7, and then he was playing 3 of the 6s and the 8s. Now, that is really unique because a lot of people play 3-7 power cards. Like, he played 3-6 and 3-8s, and his own words were, he knew that he was going to use the 6 a lot when it came to mojo for defense or for attack, and he also knew in terms of the 8s that he was going to use them quite frequently in terms of either defense for Galactus or to throw off those teamworks. Now, I'm just shocked that he actually played so few teamworks, but yes, so few power cards, but so few teamworks, so many teamworks. Apologies, it's just all over the board, and that's how kerfuffled I am with his power card build here. You can never say anything. The man just won a tournament, like, phenomenal idea, like, and honestly, it's funny that even this day and age, my eyes can still just be opened by a new player showing me something, and it's even opened my eyes to maybe my power card structure build, as I move forward, and thoughts in that regard as well. Just amazing in terms of understanding that a lot of the current meta decks were structured on these no or anti-teamwork events and weren't able to really sort of like deal with them as they were coming across the board. And he just put a teamwork after a teamwork after a teamwork. And, when that starts flowing your way, you have very quick reaction to say, I'm done, I'm out of here, I gotta concede. You can't really hold on too long to those sort of battles, because another six and another power card are coming across the board, and you're gonna have to deal with it. One of the great things I really enjoyed about not only his teamwork build but his power card build was he really used the any power really beautifully. Not only did he flex out his lower power cards in single suits as well for the teamwork effects, but he really utilized the 6 any power as well as the 7 any power teamwork, and then of course flexing all of the power cards as well. Now he did this for a reason, and the low power cards as well as the high power cards. Now he was using as his event set Annihilation Affair. Now this has two amazing events in there. Of course, one being the perfect one for the current meta of strength as well right now. No strength icon may be used to attack. What an amazing card. I can't talk about these enough. I've spoken them in my event podcasts as well. Just game-winning style events when you can build your deck around it and their deck just gets hit by it. Of course, strength being, the current meta as well right now, winning every tournament minus this one all year. And basically just an amazing choice in terms of another well thought out anti-meta strategy by Andrew Taylor. Just really well thought out deck, understood what was being played, understood what was like in the know, and just sort of like changed the game. And he understood that if he brought a lot of teamwork heat to you, he also had a dual negate, so he was stopping again those big boy style cards that would bring you back into games, or sort of like, big attacks that he has to defend. He's got negates for days over there, as well as essentially just sort of like bringing this heat of teamwork after teamwork after teamwork. So it was a really tough deck. Not only to mention, like I just was, to pair up with this no strength icon, game winning event that he had going against the current meta. Now he also flexed it with the other event, discard all multi-power cards. Now this is a unique one because it's not what a lot of people think. It's not just multi-power power cards. It's a discard all multi-power cards. So that means that's all like those multi-8 specials, any special that has a dual icon on it, anything along those lines, or any multi-power power cards like the lower multi-power 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s, and of course the 5 even as well in its respect. So really powerful event as well, especially since none of his characters have any multi-power and he wasn't using any in terms of the power cards. So often that event was, I'm assuming, getting him at least 1-to-1, if not 1-to-3, 1-to-4 style ratio, which, as we all know, that can just win a battle on its own right there. So again, that incremental sort of advantage for him in that small battle that he gets to sort of take advantage of. And I'm sure there were a few moments where he swung on just even that small event right there alone. So obviously, we're going through this, and I have to say the negates stopping all the big boy cards, and then of course, him having all the teamwork effects. Then the events with the no strength as well as the discard all multi-powers. He's playing Team Overpower as his home base. Now, I noticed this almost as like I don't want to say like a Seattle style, but I did notice that there was a lot of outbacks and Team Overpowers. And one of their favorite things they seem to love to do is place that Reavers activator right there on the Team Overpower. Now it's a great activator for them. It provides, of course, I'm assuming the 7 as well as the negate and the 1 per deck that he uses, which is Pretty Boy. Now Pretty Boy is avoid, or Reavers may not be attacked for remainder of battle. Now, this can be used in a defensive mannerism where it will avoid the attack, and then the Reavers may not be attacked for remainder of battle. Now, this is a great sort of way. Now, before I get into this one per deck a lot, I'm just going to say in general, the Outback he's using is because of its defensive prowess. Now, the Outback is probably the number one, if not, in the top three of all defensive battle sites. It just has every defensive card you could potentially think of, and the great thing is it's very spread out as to who gets all the cards. It also has a personal negate as well as a full negate. Shifts, teamwork avoids, teammate avoid one attacks, just everything you could possibly think under the sun under there for defensive prowess. And then of course, being topped off with this cataclysmic style one per deck of Pretty Boy. Now, I want to sort of just take a quick moment away from Andrew's deck and just talk about defensive style one per decks out of the battle site. Now, I've just been noticing personally that defensive style one per decks out of the battle site seem to actually almost hold a little bit more power in my mind than per se an offensive or metagame style one per deck, whether it be like some special tuck or remove hits or anything like that. I just noticed when you get the ability to not only avoid an attack but maintain a character to stay alive per se for this Pretty Boy example for the remainder of battle, but you also get the ability to defend it with your own negates and your own defensive style cards. It's just like I used to never think too highly of defensive style one per decks out of the battle site, and I gotta say, my eyes are lightly opening up to it. And as you can see, both of these players played a defensive style one per deck out of their battle site. These are the analytics you really have to break down if you're really going to become a GOAT level overpower player. Now, of course, there's truly only one GOAT, but I want you up here on my mountaintop, at least hanging out with me. So in this particular deck, again, that placing of that reverse on Team Overpower is just so powerful, because the second they get that reverse down, it essentially in their mind gives them that blanket of safety. It's a nice warm blanket just to have it sitting there and knowing that essentially the other opponent can't do much about it, unless of course they have one of those amazing opponent AIs that I love. So really well done and well thought out deck. Using your battle site more as your battle site and your negates from your characters as your defensive sort of structure from the current meta of what's going to come at you. And then of course, having a monster event that probably slows down a lot coming at you as well as throwing just nothing but speed on top of big cards, on top of random activator cards as well. Like like I said, someone taking a minute, looking at the meta, understanding everything, and just building something that just counters it perfectly. I gotta say, nothing but kudos, Andrew. Yeah, amazing, well done deck. Maybe one day it'll get to beat me, but just remember who got to take you down in that tournament. So stay humble, young prodigy. Stay humble. But with that being said, I gotta say, he is now wearing that beautiful, big, fancy Battle for Boston ring. I'm sure, it's sitting on his pedestal with a beautiful Galactus character right behind it, hopefully graded by PSA. And of course, that in my mind is truly the build of those two decks. Really well thought out, top two decks, really well structured, played masterfully by two top tier players, both in the top 10 now, both getting access into the next tournament, the Invitational tournament. And of course, thanks again for listening to the podcast. That's the NAOL Battle for Boston Tournament Breakdown, won by Andrew Taylor, second place by Tyler Bertrand, third place by yours truly, Marcel, the greatest of all time, and then fourth, taken up by my friend as well, Sean Ballantyne. Great tournament, great day. Congratulations to the four of us. And, one more celebratory tournament before next year starts, and a new chapter of OverPower starts as well. So thank everybody for listening. I know this was a bit longer, but it's been a while since I got to talk to you. So, I was in the mood and wanted to chat it out. Thanks again for listening. You've been listening to the OverPower Mountain Podcast. And again, this is Marcel, the greatest. Subscribe, like, and talk to you soon.